Well, hello there, friends. It is a great day today, and we're gonna have, I think, a little bit of a. I don't know if this is gonna be a tough conversation. It might be. I'm in a good mood today, so like this might ruin my mood a little bit. So we're gonna talk about some gender-related stuff. I think this is obviously a really important conversation to have at this time because, like, there's just so much, I think, really bad trans discourse going on, stuff that really just isn't useful, I think, right now. And I think that it's really important to talk about this kind of thing. I'm also taking a little bit of, I guess, a break from my normal, like, religious trauma type of content. And don't worry, like, that stuff is obviously still going to be going on. Like, that, my New Age series is like still continuing. I'm just like taking a little bit of a break to talk about some other issues, like some things that feel like really, pertinent in my head, because I think that they're important. And I'm hoping to have a lot of engagement from you as, the audience, having lots of questions and things like that. Yeah, and yeah, I want to see where this goes. So, um, I made a video about Blair White the other day, and I kind of wanted to continue in my just like looking into other trans people who I have differing opinions from, and maybe some, and also seeing maybe like where I can find common ground. Um, in my like personal research, I very much like to try to be even and balanced in all of my responses. I think that a lot of people would probably like when people hear about like my different, I guess, identities, like they can categorize me very quickly into kind of probably like a, like an SJW type of person, because I'm like non-binary, and probably mostly just because of that. Like that period would probably mean that people like could understand my entire identity by knowing that one thing about me. But like I mentioned in the other video, like my transness is just one part of my life. It's not everything. Um, but yeah, it's important to discuss. And yeah, it's good to be here. Hey Blue, it's good to have you here. Hello to all of you guys in the audience. It's great to have everyone here. I'm definitely in for lots of conversation and engagement. So hopefully that goes pretty well. So we're going to be talking about a YouTuber called the Offensive Tranny. I want to watch one of his videos because he talks a lot about like like he's like a lot of like very like kind of Ariel Scarcella Blair White type of energy, kind of like we'll make fun of the blue-haired non-binary person, like that type of thing. I just think that a lot of this stuff isn't really helpful, generally, because the type of people who like that type of content probably aren't going to be the ones like standing up for like trans people's rights, like period. But like I said, I'm making generalizations. I'm probably going to speaking pretty hyperbolically. I am very biased. I have tons of biases. I'm not. I'm not going to like hide those things. I also have like a lot of trans and queerness and gay related trauma. So that obviously is also going to impact the way that I have this conversation. And I'm a clinician and I work with a lot of other queer and trans people, and I hear how this type of stuff impacts them as well. So I feel extra passionate about these topics. Um, okay. Let me see. Not average Joes, or just interesting. So like, okay. So I think this is really important. And I think that, for example, like I definitely would agree that there's a lot of, especially when you're looking at things through the media's lens, like when you're like extra, like maybe like queer looking, like you said, quirky, personified queer people, the people with maybe the like you, I don't know, like you know what the stereotypical person looks like with like the blue hair and like the septum piercing. Like I don't know. I feel like those are the things. Those are the things that people associate, the conservatives will associate with like the queers or whatever. And yeah, I just think that like it's more popular to do that maybe. And for example, like if someone's gonna do a like if they're gonna look for like a really queer person first for a certain reason, like they're gonna want a person who like looks really queer. Um, like they wouldn't hire the guy who's like the really like straight passing person to like represent the queers. And I don't like, but the thing is like that type of person is also like represents a part of the community. Like we're not a monolith. And just because of all of the way that the world works, people just we're okay, this is evolutionary, friends. We are animals, right? We make quick judgments. It's not even like us making them. It's like our bodies are incredible and they react faster than like our prefrontal cortex can even react. So like our brain stem is making quick judgments about people, about groups of people, for our safety, right? This is this is an evolutionary thing. This happens, but I think like after that primal response happens, we can make a little bit of kind of better judgments, right? I can say like, oh no, that person, the way they look is scary to me. But then I can be like, oh, okay, that's just me kind of going off of stereotypes. And I actually rationally don't have to respond this way. But, I agree with Dream Boy saying that like very liberal, but turned somewhere moderate. I would definitely agree that I am probably a little bit more moderate than I would have been a little bit ago. And that's happened since I've just become more skeptical overall since like last summer. My skepticism generally has caused me to kind of like pull back on things when I just say every blank is like this. I'm like, wait a second, let me kind of like do a little bit more research and figure out if I actually mean when I say certain things. And I've really, if you've noticed on my channel, I've stayed away from like trans related topics for quite a while. Yeah, I mostly be doing like other kinds of things, and that is for a very good reason. Like I personally have needed a lot of time away from trans discourse altogether for my mental health. I have some obsessive tendencies and can really like latch on to some things. My internalized transphobia can really latch on to a lot of these really harmful ideologies, and it can really mess with my head. So I have to be super, super careful. I sometimes have to go on like bans where I like ban myself from consuming particular types of content because of my mental health. I need to be pretty cautious. And I am encouraging that for you guys as well. While it's important to stay educated and kind of look at what other people are talking about, and keep your mind open, if it's really triggering to you on a consistent basis and you're noticing that you're walking away still feeling triggered and things like that, it might be a good idea to pull back and take a little bit of a break. But yeah, also what you were saying, Dream Boy, with there's a lot of like intensity. Like if you have to be a leftist, you have to be like really like, I don't know, dramatic about it or something like that. I also will say that I'm pretty sure that a lot of this is like really online stuff. I'm sure that this stuff also happens in real life. I don't have a lot of I don't really have a lot of like friends in real life. I talk to a lot of people online, and like my wife and her family who lives in the area. So I don't like have a lot of this like conversation in real life. When I have like a conversation one-on-one with, or like a small group of like queer and trans people, like this stuff, like the real, I guess, out there type of stuff that you see on TikTok and things like that stuff doesn't really affect me. It's not really my life. My life is I'm just a regular person who happens to be trans, and then I talk about it sometimes. Yeah. I get particularly upset when people use detrans folk to fight for access to care. Can we talk about that too? Can we talk about the new Jubilee video? I can't, I'm trying to stay away. Yeah, I watched it, and I was in a good place because I was fresh out of a break, like a 2-week or so break from like triggering content, and I had just gotten off, and I was like, I think I'm ready to watch this. and it was pretty good. Actually, it wasn't. There was some stuff that was said that was problematic. There was one question in particular that made me upset. Maybe actually this week, if I have some time, I'll watch the whole video and we'll kind of watch it together. And for example, sometimes when I'm in a rough place, I can't watch content by itself. I have to watch someone else talking about it, because like sometimes I can't, like I get too stuck in like that transphobic space in my head that I can't like make good arguments for myself anymore. So having someone else stop and be like, this person's making a ridiculous argument helps me take breaks, as well as I'm consuming the content, to like pause, reflect, like think about what I thought about what the person was saying. And that's, yeah. So yeah, I did watch the video, and I'll watch that later on this week. But yeah, there are detransitioning is a really important thing. We need to talk about it, right? We need to have these conversations. But the problem is when detransitioners say things like, now nobody should get should get care. Now nobody should transition as a minor. These are just things where I just don't think that we should make blanket decisions. Sure, there might be specific cases where we need to be more careful than others. Regardless of anything, I am very much in agreement with individuals who say that like therapeutic like interventions probably would need to be more prevalent, or I guess more encouraged than than they are being right now. But at the same time, you know, I'm a person who I have like my experience, and that is pretty much what like bothers me and impacts me. I don't like worry that much about a lot of other people's experiences. I'll like help people by like talking about what I went through. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna say like, oh, my doctor didn't warn me about X, Y, or Z, therefore nobody should get medical transition. Like those things are less useful, in my opinion. But anyway, I appreciate the engagement. This stuff is really important, but we'll see. Maybe like I want to watch. I have 2 videos that I wanted to watch, and I'm thinking like I might look at a couple others if I see anything else that interests me, because the ones that I have here are really short videos. So I think that that'll be pretty good. I also think that like I want to have conversations specifically about detransition because of how like anxious it makes me. The whole idea of like detransitioners like really makes me freak out and anxious, and like makes me super anxious, and I don't like really talking about it. And that is because it's like for religious reasons and like conversion therapy type of things, it like triggers a lot of stuff in my head. So it's not something that I like to engage with a lot. I'm working on doing it a little bit more because it's something that I don't want to avoid. But yeah, I get emotional about it. And I'm not afraid to admit that. So, all right, oh, here we go. All right, we're gonna watch this video of Marcus. This is a video of him like early in his transition. So like his voice has changed like significantly since then. But like, yeah, he's offensive. Like, you know, his name is I think his name is Marcus, but his YouTube name is the Offensive Tranny, and he does a good job of that. I would say. So let's learn a little bit about why, I guess maybe Marcus and people who would agree with him, like why they don't agree with the whole like non-binary concept, and also like why people like also like probably need more education. That's gonna be me. My input is like why people need more education about non-binary people, and what happens when people have misinformation about what it means to not be non-binary. Okay.
I want to explain a little further why I don't believe in non-binary. The reason why I even talk about this is that you see non-binary activists, they want to change the Western culture. They want to make non-binary a part of our culture. And as a transsexual, I don't really approve. The whole point of being transgender is that your biological sex makes you so uncomfortable that you transition to the opposite. You're not only
So that's like the first thing that I would immediately disagree with. And I've mentioned something about this way before, because in another video he's stated that the word trans means opposite, and that's just factually incorrect. The word, let me just look it up again. I don't have it memorized. Trans definition. No, not that. Trans prefix. Just because I want to be, okay, I want to be very, very accurate, as much as I can be accurate. So trans means on the, like, across or beyond. It does also mean like on the other side of. So I guess maybe that's where he gets the opposite part, but like the across and beyond, I think also are included in that word. So yeah, there's also like other things like change is another meaning of the prefix trans. So there's multiple meanings for the prefix of trans, not just opposite. So I would say that trans would mean to move in the direction of like some type of transformation, and like once again, like I define trans as someone whose gender is different from the gender that they are assigned at birth. Yeah, period.
Transitioning to the opposite gender, you just want to fit into society. And that's not a bad thing. Transgender people, they are discreet. They're just trying to live a normal life. But non-binary activists, they want to change that. Keep in mind, trans people and people who claim to be trans, they are a minority. Yet we take so much space when it comes to politics and the media. I don't get it.
So actually, I would probably agree with this as well. Like, I really do appreciate representation, and I think representation and visibility is so important. But like the way that particularly like the mainstream media is just like talking about trans stuff every week, like a trans person breathed in a sport. Look how awful it is. Like that type of stuff is really unnecessary and it's causing a lot of problems. And I think just like needs to stop. I think this video is like 3 years old even. So things have changed since then. And I would say like the media has gotten a little bit more directly inflammatory towards trans people. I don't know. Like, for example, guys, like when like there are news stories about like Kid Rock like shooting a bunch of cans of Bud Light because Dylan Mulvaney is a spokesperson. Like, what? Like, who has time? Who has time to do this? Like, why are, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the problem. The problem is not that there are fruit gender people on the internet just talking about stuff. The problem is that trans people are that there are people who are so angry about trans people being represented that they would like, and I'm not gonna say that like, I just like why are you shooting the cans of Bud Light? Like, I don't know, just there's a lot of rage. So that's the problem with society. And yes, we are trying to change mainstream society because mainstream society is typically generally transphobic. And shifting society would make life better for you as well, Marcus, who is a trans person. And even if you do want to just live your life, be private, do your own thing, that's really great. And you can do that also as well as the person who wants to be and do whatever they want on the internet. And this isn't even saying that I like agree with a fruit gender person. Like I'm not a person who I don't understand xenogenders a bunch. Like I've done a little bit of research into them. And like since I like, yeah, I guess I can like conceptualize my gender decently, sort of. Like I don't necessarily need other words to do it, but I guess I understand how other people could feel that. You could feel the need to use other words to help them describe their experience of gender. Gender is so complicated and confusing. I imagine why it could be useful to use other things to get creative. But that would be another video in and of itself to have a conversation about that and my whole opinion and everything. But let's continue.
I've been trying to keep an open mind when it comes to the non-binary ideology. Yet I've been identifying as genderqueer at some point when I was younger. So believe me, I'm not close-minded. I have given the ideology a chance, but enough is enough. As a transsexual, I'm very triggered every single time these people are in the media and so on.
So real quick, I'm like, I have this issue with people doing this thing where it's like, I've given non-binary ideology a chance, and like I'm a person, like I'm not an ideology. I'm an entire human being, right? Like non-binary just is a part of that. And so, for example, you hear a lot, like when I hear like like the gay ideology and the homosexual ideology, like it seems like a dog whistle for like conservative people or whatever, for conservative, or what's that called? Family values or whatever. But yeah, gender ideology, non-binary ideology, like they're just, you know what I'm saying? It's just trans ideology. There are trans people, there are non-binary people. We talk about our experiences. It's weird because it's like, I don't know, like other things don't get categorized like that, like artist ideology or like moss lovers ideology, like talking about like, oh, the moss lovers. And I like specifically just because I'm obsessed with moss lately. Look at this cool piece of moss that I have on my desk. Isn't it cool? See, that's what I'm talking about. I just think like when people make these categories and like make it into like even an academic or political type of a thing, like you're taking away from the fact that like I'm a full person, right? And I'm not an ideology that you can disagree with. You can't disagree with me. Like you can disagree with my beliefs, but you can't disagree that I exist. Like I'm right here, and I'm very much non-binary. So sorry to break it to you, dude.
Triggered when people are DMing me that they think I'm one of them because I'm not. I know I look like an SJW. I got the glasses, I got the look. I know, but I'm not.
What is the glasses? I don't know if glasses makes you an SJW. I wouldn't say that they look like an SJW to me, by the way. Or he, I know that his pronouns are he, him.
One of them. Here's some practical reasons why I don't believe in non-binary. First of all, when you hear about non-binary and the definition of being non-binary, they say that if you challenge gender roles and gender expectations, if that's true, I think everyone is non-binary. I think it's rare that we see people who are perfectly masculine and perfectly feminine and have a mindset of someone who's living in the 50s. And
right, I definitely would say like that's interesting perspective. Like nobody fits into the exact role of masculine or feminine or man or woman. I would say like for as many people as exist, there are that many forms or expressions of gender. I would say like when you get into like real, and for okay, the other thing that also makes me upset that people don't really talk about is that they say a lot of things like, yeah, people really don't have an understanding of gender like in the 50s, but maybe a lot of these people aren't from religious upbringings because they don't understand how alive this ideology is. Like this isn't like this sexist type of ideology around gender presentation and very strict gender roles is not dead by any means. And that's why this type of conversation to talk about the nuance of gender is really important. And then also like I think people really sometimes underestimate human beings and how many human beings are really rigid right now in society. There are still, for example, in America, there are Amish people who are like Amish women, for example, who like may never have an opportunity to see any other possibility of how to live their life based on the society that they're born in. You know what I'm saying? Like that's, you know, that's a thing. Like I have opinions about that, but whatever. Let's see what else he has to say.
if that statement were to be true, non-binary people, they're actually defining other people's identity, and that is bigoted. The second thing, dysphoria. Non-binary
Wait, wait. Does anyone else understand this? How does okay, is it maybe he's saying that like because non-binary people say that other people are masculine or feminine and they're saying that they're outside of that, that is them categorizing other people? Perhaps maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know. I don't know what that means really. Um but yeah, I maybe. I don't know. Like are there bigoted non-binary people? Probably. Like but I don't know if that's what you're saying. I'm confused. And number two is dysphoria. So let's see what he has to say about non-binary people and their experience of dysphoria.
people, they don't experience dysphoria. I don't care about
What? What? How dare you? Wow. How dare you? Literally. That's awful. That is, oh, wow. It's great. It is awesome when people who have no idea what your lived experience is like want to like come into your life and like talk about your lived experience. It's wonderful. It really is. Like, I love it. No, it's so annoying. Like, why does he sound like a mini? See, this is what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? And I think that like this type of, it's like weird gender critical ideology that gets pulled into trans people. For example, like Buck Angel is really big into this type of stuff, and Blair White, we've talked about her as well. It's really annoying. But yeah, I have dysphoria. Yeah, it's awful that people like make assumptions about other people's experiences. Like the one thing that I will say is like there are a lot of definitions of what a non-binary person is. I guess my definition would be someone whose gender doesn't fall into what I guess wider society would agree is like masculine or feminine or something like that. For example, if you want to look at non-binary from a more like trans-medicalist perspective, they would say like non-binary people are those who kind of wish to have sex characteristics that are like mixed rather than for example, if a man, a MTF person didn't want like chest growth at all, but they wanted bottom surgery. Like that would technically be like a non-binary desire for different sex characteristics. Once again, things like FTM or MTFs who like want to keep their facial hair but want to feminize the rest of their body. That would be a non-binary, very non-binary desire for their sex characteristics to be kind of blended. And then also don't even get me started on the individuals who say that inherently things like that are like kinks or like some type of like sexual thing. That annoys the crap out of me. But that's for another day.
The backlash I'm going to get on this one, but if you don't experience gender dysphoria, you're cis. Gender dysphoria is one of the worst things you can ever put a human through, in my opinion. And if you fake having that, I think you're suffering from something else. Sorry, not sorry. I'm coming.
I would, if you're faking having gender dysphoria, I would probably be like, why would you fake having gender dysphoria? I don't understand why anyone would fake that. I'm also kind of like on the fence of whether or not I would say like you need dysphoria to be trans. I would say like in the other video I mentioned, like me thinking that there is, I think a useful distinction that isn't really popular, but it's kind of the difference between like transgender and transsexual, like a person who really desires to like trans their sex characteristics with hormones and therapy or hormones and surgery and things like that, and someone who just has a different gender identity and maybe can be satisfied with some other types of social transition or different things like that. And well, even that, I'm not quite sure because, for example, if you're going to socially transition, that means you're probably experiencing social dysphoria. I just think that dysphoria is very complex. Dysphoria doesn't only look one particular way. Non-binary dysphoria can look very different from the binary trans people's dysphoria. And I think everyone should be allowed to have those experiences. To limit a person's experience of dysphoria, what that actually does is it can cause harm because it stops people from identifying themselves, like with other people, for example. Like I didn't know that, like, I just kind of thought I had this weird disconnection for my body for the majority of my life. And now that I'm at this point now I know what it's like to like take up space in my body. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it's like to be a full person and like look in the mirror and like kind of engage with yourself in a real way. Like before I transitioned, it was a very weird connection with myself and my body. But I didn't have the words for it necessarily. It didn't necessarily feel like I wanted to be a boy or I wanted to be a man. It was a different feeling, and I didn't know any of the words for that. But once I understood what they were, I was like, wow, that really describes how I feel about myself. And I was able to then understand myself better, have language for my dysphoria, understand what it was. And having language for my dysphoria sometimes amplified my feelings for dysphoria because I understood what was going on. But then I had some medical treatment and now I'm in a much better place. Like, that's great for me. And this isn't everybody's journey, but it was mine. He's going to continue to say some really awful stuff about people's experience of gender and really making a lot of assumptions that don't apply to everyone, and then making it seem like that's a requirement for being trans. But let's just hear it from him.
Coming off a little harsh, but how do you think I feel whenever non-binary people, they are in the media controlling the trans identity? Whenever someone claims to be trans when they're not, how do you think I feel? Another thing I want to talk about is
Sorry, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be mean, but I'm just like, boo hoo, boo hoo. A trans person that you don't agree with is in the media. Like for example, I could be mad that the majority of there's a lot of trans conversation about trans women and trans men, and trans masculine people are, maybe discussed a little bit less and kind of like thought of less. I could be really upset every single time I saw a trans woman in the media. Like, they're taking away all of the support from trans men and trans masculine. I don't do that. I'm like, there are trans people. I should support them. Like, whatever. But for someone with Marcus's perspective, I understand why he would be so upset. And if you're thinking that, for example, I understand it. If you are this type of a trans person and for example, you're a binary trans woman and you see a non-binary trans person with a beard and, wear like very feminine and everything else, but having a beard, they're like, how are you not ridiculously dysphoric, right? Like, for example, when I see there are trans masculine people who are really comfortable with having like a larger chest. Like, thinking of myself like that makes me so dysphoric, right? And like can make me feel uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean I get to be mean to other people for the way that they are comfortable in their bodies. Like, they are allowed to have a different transition, a different journey than I am, right? Just because I get uncomfortable because of what makes them comfortable doesn't mean that they're wrong. Doesn't mean that their experience isn't actually a transgender experience.
pronouns. Whenever people use the wrong pronouns when it comes to me, I get really dysphoric. I can't control it. I mean, it's an honest mistake. I understand.
Yeah.
But my brain, I react emotionally before rationally.
Me too.
And I can't help it. Even though I don't blame you personally for making a mistake, my brain is not loving it.
No.
That's why when non-binary people, they are upset about people using the wrong pronouns, they can actually control that feeling. It's just like if people are calling me a bitch, too skinny, too ugly, whatever, I can actually control.
You're joking, right? Who told you any of this stuff? Did you talk to okay. Did you talk to a single non-binary person? Or did you just watch a video? Or two? Like, that's probably what happened. Like, for example, I'm not like trying to put myself on a pedestal or something. I've watched a ton of your content, Marcus. Like, I know a lot about your positions. I've watched a lot of your content. So it's not like, I don't understand your perspective. And I also watch a lot of content of a lot of other types of people who have similar perspectives. I've joined a lot of, not necessarily joined, but done a lot of research on other trans medicalist subreddits and stuff like that. So I'm pretty familiar with with trans medicalist perspective, which basically Marcus is I would say a very strict trans medicalist. There are some who aren't maybe all affirming to every single gender identity, but are still more affirming to non-binary people and kind of maybe some gender queer people or gender fluid people. But there are different perspectives. And the reason why I'm stopping so much and talking so much about this is because I think that this is a helpful way to kind of branch off a lot of conversations I want to have in the future, and just so I'm kind of just bringing up a bunch of topics for future.
Control my reaction. Of course, it's rude and I'll be offended, but I can actually control that feeling. Sexuality. I have explained before that you can't really be gay or straight and being non-binary, because being gay or a lesbian, that requires you to be a man or a woman. So you can't be gay as a non-binary person and straight. You can imagine. So it doesn't really make sense to me to be non-binary, because how can a person not have asexuality? That's weird, right?
Wow.
If a non-binary person is gay, the person is only attracted to other non-binary people. Is that how it works? Another thing I want to talk about.
Okay, so I wanted you to hear that whole argument. So, all right, so you're like, I'm confused. If a non-binary person isn't a man or a woman, how could they be gay? Great, word, or great question. And for example, I'm a non-binary person. I would call myself gay, generally gay. I use that word a lot. I use the word queer a lot to describe my sexuality. I'm mostly into women, and like really feminine men or kind and non and like androgynous people generally. But primarily, I would say I'm attracted to women. And do you know what, actually, Marcus? There's actually language that people have used to describe people's attraction. So, for example, a non-binary person who is attracted to women would be trixic, and a non-binary person who is attracted to men, or mostly, I think, more masculine things, would be toric, and then you'd be bisexual or pansexual if you were both or whatever. So those are the words that you're looking for. So just because you don't know what the words are doesn't mean they don't exist. It doesn't mean non-binary people don't have a sexuality. Very interesting way that like he jumped from there and was like, just because I don't understand how they would have a sexuality, they don't have a sexuality, then I don't know. It's really weird. Yeah, so there are things that I wish I could make people understand about being non-binary. I don't know how anyone could just dismiss how others are feeling. I'm at a loss for words. Me too. It's crazy to me. Like, how is it that you just are like, I don't get it. So they probably just don't have a sexual, like, that's crazy. Yeah, do research. Do research before, do research before you talk about stuff, at least a little bit, so that you know what you're talking about and you just don't say stuff that's just like blatantly inaccurate. I think that the offensive tranny is the way they are politically because of the constant pressure to society to diminish queer people as of currently. And that's really what I like. I don't know. I try really hard to not like say that this is the reason why someone is doing this, because I think I would be annoyed if someone did that for me. And so I try not to do it to other people. But I understand why it would be popular to do it right now. For example, like we call them cis bootlickers for a reason. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. And I know that people use that word, and then other trans people will use that to say, you guys just hate all cis people. That is just so far from the truth. Like, I'm married to a cis person and I love a cis person. You know what I mean? Most of the people in my life are cis people who I care for very deeply. Like, it's so silly. But but at the same time, when you're in like an in group, you know what it's like to tease and poke fun at people who aren't in the group. Like, you do it. It's a very normal thing. Like, when I'm with a bunch of queer people, I'm like, oh yeah, ha ha ha, the straighties, like they don't get it. Like, as a joke. Like, it's a lot of people who are queer have straight friends, and some of them don't. Some people are really rigid about their friend group, and they're like, I would really only want to be friends with queer and trans people. But those are just those people. That's not everyone. That's not all trans people. And by the way, sometimes we forget about all of the queer and trans people who like aren't online chronically and like are just living their regular lives, but like aren't on the internet enough to even know that these conversations and stuff are going on. But they are like a really important, they kind of should be included in the trans conversation. But just because they don't show up online and there's no TikToks to make fun of them about, like, it's just, people are going to talk about it a lot less.
About is that people criticize me and say, well, what about gender therapists? They are aware of non-binary. They think that non-binary is real. Well, I just disagree with them. I think the PC.
Great, good, thanks, awesome. You know what's awesome is when people oh my God, people just go, oh, science and clinical professionals, you guys are just wrong. Sounds like anti-vaxxers. Like, the thing is like, I understand, like, for example, that like there are problems with everything. Doctors make mistakes. Science has been wrong. People in academia can hold very weird positions. Sometimes when people are doing research, they can get very biased, and their opinions their research can be skewed because of their bias and opinions. And people can hold wrong opinions until several years later, until someone repeats the experiments or repeats the research and gets different results. Yes, these things are possible. But do you want to know how we figure these things out? By trusting the science and by using science to continue to ask questions, not by saying, oh, I just disagree. Do you know what that does? That keeps you stuck. That keeps you stuck for forever. For example, If we were to always just think and be satisfied with the earth being the center of the universe and the sun revolving around the earth, do you think that we would have gotten where we are today just by being like, I disagree and I'm satisfied? No, that's ridiculous. What we need to do is to say, I have questions about this thing, therefore I want to ask questions. I want to do research. Let's do some brain scans. Let's try to understand what makes people this way. Or not even necessarily that, because I think, for example, you have the issue with like finding the gay gene and like what that means ethically or whatever. But for example, but yeah, just saying, I'm not going to believe the therapist and whatever. Like you sound ridiculous. A person sounds ridiculous when they just say, I refuse to trust the science. And the reason why this particularly triggers me so much is because of the cultish background that I came from that said, oh, you say the earth is billions of years old? No, I disagree. My God says, no, shut up, dude. Like, that's ridiculous to me. I think it's awful that people like, first, grr, it just makes me mad. Yeah, science has a lot to say about gender. And for example, like science definitely would support, I wish I had like actual research and stuff, and I know where to find the information. I just need to like gather it and maybe like make some content around it. But there is research that does support the existence of non-binary people. There's some question on the existence of like gender fluidity. But some people also would kind of would say that was kind of a non-binary presentation with a fluctuation in the experience of gender dysphoria, which would make sense in kind of from a clinical perspective. Grr.
Culture is taking over our education system, and I think that future therapists,
Also, the woke lib mob is taking over education, and therefore all of the therapists are going to be brainwashed.
Are taught these kind of things so they seem more inclusive and diverse. Just because something is written down and it's in the system doesn't mean that you necessarily have to agree with it. According to the
very true. You're correct. And friends, even though I'm a very like, recently I've been more like, okay, we should really kind of like look to scientific, medical, and academic consensus. Those things can be pretty helpful in helping you build conclusions around things. I would say tends to be a reliable source. But can there be places where you might want to think a little bit? Yeah, for sure. Always, try and find multiple sources. If there's just one scientist who's saying this thing, question it. See, are there other scientists who support it and back it up? Who is supporting and backing it up? Do they have bias? What bias is it? Actually, it's not do they have bias, what kind of bias, because everybody has bias. Also, are there steps in the experimental material that help weed out bias?
Danish system, you can be accused of racism if you're homophobic. It says in the paper that's how it works. But does it make sense? And do I agree with it? No. The last thing I want to talk about.
I don't know if it's racist to be homophobic. I don't live in Denmark. He lives in Denmark. So I don't know.
About is that I know I seem mean. I come off as mean when I talk about the non-binary ideology. But I don't care. I'm tired that the PC culture is taking over right now. And I feel like as a trans person, I have a little bit of privilege.
Once again, PC culture, you can very much hear the conservative dog whistles in his language, which is like, and the thing is like, I'm good if you're a conservative. Do your thing. But yeah.
To talk about this. I don't attack people who are not in the public, who are not outspoken. Whatever you do behind closed doors is your own business. But as soon as you come forward and you take a lot of room in the media and so on, I'm going to say something. And I also want people who are identifying as non-binary to take a step back and be like, is this really who I am? Does this really make sense?
What?
I'm trans, but I don't owe the non-binary movement anything. I'm a free...
What? Okay, everyone. All the non-binaries, let's gather together. Okay, let's see. Like, Marcus, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful, wonderful insight. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be this condescending. But I'm a tiny YouTuber, so I doubt, and he has a much larger channel than me, so I doubt he'd look at my video. And I'm rambling for a long time, so whatever. Um, but yeah, like and honestly, guys, like this is the kind of shit that gets into my head and puts a little NB phobic seed in my head that like I can take away with later and like lay at night, lay in bed at night, like, oh my God, my life is a lot, like, you know what I mean? And like ruminate on this stuff and freak out. But it's like my lived experience, like, you know what I mean? When I live my life, I'm like, okay, like um I'm a very non-binary person. Like as soon as I take a break from like the media and I just spend time by myself and I live my life, it's like, okay, like I know why I know who I am. It's because it's just who I am. Obviously dysphoria is a part of that experience, but also gender euphoria is a huge part of that experience. When my wife uses certain words and certain terms to describe me, like it feels really good and really comforting. When people use words that don't resonate with me, that don't describe me, I feel uncomfortable. Like it's very easy for me to understand who I am. You know what I mean? So I don't need people like you to put doubts into the heads of innocent non-binary people who are just existing.
Free thinker, I'm independent, and I'm trying to gather people in the middle to get a mutual understanding. I would love some.
What? I don't think, which, okay. See, I'm trying not to react super emotionally. This is a place where me and Marcus would agree. I feel like he is a little bit more on the conservative side, and maybe he would think that I'm more on the liberal side. Like I'm too much on the liberal side to be in the middle. And you know what? Like it's so hard. It's tricky to understand this stuff because I really don't think that he has a very centrist perspective. What he says sounds very familiar to, for example, what Blair White says, and I'm pretty sure that they've made content together, and Ariel Scarcella, and they are all conservatives. If someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they are all conservatives. So you sound very conservative in the way you describe things. But if you are really a centrist, that's very interesting perspective, because that's the thing is people can. I think there are different ways you can be. I think you can be like socially this and like politically a different way. I think there are different ways to have like a political identity. So I don't know, maybe you are a centrist, but I don't know, dude. Maybe people are centrist until it comes to trans stuff and they get real conservative.
Feedback, even though I know I'm going to get a lot of hate. I don't care. Come at me. I want to explain a little further.
Okay. All right. That was that. Anyone have any thoughts? Goodness gracious. Man, I'm not a fan of I'm not a fan of their content, really. Because it's, yeah, it's very much has kind of this type of opinion and, sticks with it. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder what's more radical, if it's more radical to, come out here and like be super anti-trans, or because you do get quite a bit of hate, but at the same time you get a lot of support for it. One of the things that I do like to do also is like look at comments a little bit. Probably not too much because some of them can be worse. Sometimes comments can be worse than the videos. I get more dysphoria from the comments. But for example, like yeah, like goodness gracious, it's just a lot of people being like, I can't understand, I can't wrap my head around non-binary. Sure, yeah, and you're boiling, me too. Right? It makes you so like angry, upsetting. Like there's a lot of people in the comments that are just like, wow, it's about time that we get someone talking about this with a brain involved. See, I'm just gonna read some of these ones that are not too bad. You're a breath of fresh air and sanity, and honestly, on a human level of confidence. Yeah. Right. And like, okay, for example, this one is talking about, I'm not going to read this whole thing, I don't think, but there are people who, like this one person said, they identified as gender fluid for a while, but then they realized that they didn't have dysphoria and they just liked the idea of looking like a boy out of curiosity, but they're just a cis person, which is great. It's great to figure out your gender. And do you know what you had to do that? You had to explore your gender. Ah, grr. And that was a good thing, right? Or was that a bad thing? I don't think that was a bad experience. You identified as something, you tried it out, you made a realization, and then you made another decision. Like that doesn't feel very bad to me. I think obviously like detransition can be very emotional though. I'm not gonna, I don't want to minimize that experience. I think even if you, for example, socially transitioned and had to detransit, that would be very intensely emotional. So I don't want to minimize that experience or make it smaller than it was. But you know, that doesn't make the gender fluid experience not real. So that's kind of where I am with that whole thing. And then a lot of other people talking about how they had certain experiences as a child, but then they grew up and then they were fine. Like, great. This stuff makes me frustrating. You know what I mean? Like, it's. I think I also understand why some of the lesbians, like the older lesbians, are like the non-binaries are taking away the gays from us. And oh crap. And we don't have, there are no more lesbians. There's only, all of the lesbians are transing into trans man or trans masculine people. That, I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true. It just makes me laugh because it's just like, I don't think that's what's happening. They're like, all of the trans people, all of the lesbians that I knew back in the day are now trans. And I'm like, who? Like, and that's the thing. It's like, if a person has an experience where their entire friend group like transitioned, that might be like, oh wow, that's very odd. Like, huh, how unusual. Does that mean that every lesbian is now a trans person? It just doesn't make any sense. Once again, my wife is very much a lesbian-ish person. I don't know. I came around and kind of confused the whole thing. It's really funny because one time, it was so funny because like she's pretty much like a lesbian. There was like one time where there was like a pretty feminine, like a gay man. She's like, oh wow, I can see that he's like kind of cute. And she's like, oh no, it's happening. And I'm like, haha, I'm confusing your sexuality. Because yeah, I've transitioned, so like my appearance become like a lot more masculine. I am a masculine person. So that whatever. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just, so she's still a lesbian, very much so, I guess, but is probably uses like the queer as a label now because like she feels weird identifying as lesbian. But yeah, I don't know. Would you guys be interested in like talking to my wife and hearing a little bit about our story? Would you like to have her on or something? Or maybe we'll have like a podcast. Would you be interested in that? I don't know. Let me know. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to watch another video. This one is, oh wait, what the hell? Exit full screen, weird. Okay, there it is. So we're gonna watch another video. I wanna see how this one goes. It's another video of his. His videos are nice and short, so that's pretty nice. This one's 5 minutes. Well, not all of them. These are older videos of his. But this one is another one in his non-binary series. I think that he got all of his information on non-binary people from this video. That is a hyperbolic generalization, by the way. I don't know where he got his information from. I just assume. And yeah, I think this one is interesting because, you'll see when I.
Non-binary is someone whose gender doesn't fall within the context of the binary that we set up in society.
It's part of a larger kind of goal of questioning these assumptions about gender and questioning why there only need to be two.
There's a million ways to be a man and a woman. That's why we don't need more than 2 genders. If the statement gender is created by society were to be a bad thing, why are the majority of people comfortable being a man and a woman?
It gives
I don't know what that means. I don't know. Okay, he said that in the other video. There's thousands of ways to be a man or a woman. Therefore, there's no need. Okay, pretty much I would say that his argument is because there's multiple ways to be a man or a woman, there's no need to be non-binary. Great. It's just incorrect. Just because and a lot of my arguments are like, it's incorrect because I exist. And I have like a very non-binary, I guess, desire. Like I have a very strong desire for like mixed sex characteristics. You know what I mean? Like my chest is flat, but I don't necessarily want a ton of facial hair. I have a little bit of it, but I keep it pretty low these days. You know, like my like even bottom surgery, like I wouldn't want like maybe a traditional bottom surgery or something like that. So like those things could be considered non-binary, like very non-binary right. So my experience would not line up with a trans man's, like someone who is a binary trans man. Maybe like some trans men who maybe have some like just different desires. Like I, for example, knew a trans man who was a trans man, like had like tons, had gotten sex reassignment surgery and lots of different surgeries and stuff like that, was on hormones and everything, but like very much presented like a woman or a standard female would. Very long hair, a lot of makeup, dresses and skirts and things like that. People would be like, why would you do that? Like, why would you transition if you're just gonna look like a girl? It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what you think that this person should do. Like that's how they want to experience gender. And I don't remember if they were non-binary or a binary trans man, I'm not sure. But the thing is like they, for example, like the only way that I would know what their gender, what their felt sense of gender is by talking to them and by understanding it from their language. That's why non-binary makes sense. It's because like the experiences of man and woman just don't describe everyone. Yes, there are a bunch of different ways to describe both of those things, but sometimes there are things that meet in the middle that we also need to describe. This is my standard examples for things in nature that are binary but are also not. Dry land and water, right? Those can be considered as binaries in nature, but we also have like wetlands and marshes and places that are mixed, kind of swamps. They're land a little bit and they're water a little bit, right? And also we have things like day and night. They are strict opposites. We have blinding sunlight and, you know, a little bit of moonlight when the sky looks dark. But we also have sunrise and sunset and dawn and dusk. These unique times of day where they were apparently important enough to have their own descriptions. So why not us people who fall within that middle land of man and woman? And we're just like, let's just give us a word. You're like, no, don't define it. Remain undefined and then put yourself into a category. That's pretty much what we're saying, is that we're just saying that we would not like to do that. We would like to just say that here, you know, we are dusk, for example. We're not day or night, we're dusk. So let us be dusk. Like, no, pick a side, day or night, bitch.
gives me the freedom to express myself. If I wake up one day and I want to spike my hair and do punk rock makeup, I can do it.
Isn't it offensive to say that if a man wears a dress or plays with makeup, that he's less of a man and he's not a man at all? Why do you need a new gender just because you like makeup? Can't real men like feminine stuff?
So great points. So first, from the non-binary person, what they said, I think, like, for example, that experience can be even a cis person can have that experience. If I want to do makeup and spike my hair, like a cis person could, for example, feel that exact same way. And you know what this actually like makes me think of? It makes me think of the autistic experience. Like when someone says like, oh, that's an autism thing. I thought that was just a person thing. Doesn't everybody do that? And it's like, yes, that's because autism is a human experience. It's just a unique human experience. So yeah, the non-binary experience is unique, but it's also a human experience. So there might be things that other people relate to. Probably not things like gender dysphoria, maybe. Well, actually, or maybe boob jobs, you know, and wiener enlargement things. I would maybe say that those might fall into the range of gender dysphoria for cis people. But you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think. There was something else that he said I wanted to. Let me just.
Makeup, that he's less of a man.
Oh yeah, being less of either thing. So I hate it when gender critical people use this argument because they are the same. They're the same people who will like now I like lost my train of thought. But they'll like. And okay, maybe I'm being a little bit inaccurate here, but like, let's say conservatives. I'll say not necessarily gender critical, but maybe more conservatives. Like, a conservative will see someone like dressing like a man in a dress, and will be like, "You are emasculating yourself." Like that is the larger opinion of society, is that you emasculate yourself if you wear feminine clothing, and you are a man if you're wearing a bunch of masculine things. If you have a what's that called? Women with a lot of muscle also get called men, right? That is the society we live in, where we're very, very strict. As soon as a woman has muscle, you're a man, haha, man body person. As soon as a boy wants to like wear makeup and a dress, oh, you're just a sissy. You're like, this is the kind of language that we use in society. So this is why people think this way. You know what I'm saying? It's so frustrating to look at this content. I don't want to be mean. I'm gonna, yeah. I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed because you don't.
And real men like feminine stuff.
Every couple of decades, some designer decides that men's shorts are 5 inches shorter or 5 inches longer. In the 70s, if you look at what men were wearing, they were like Rockettes, like shorts were up to here, and now it's like get it, down to the knee. Non-binary is freedom from that whole game. It's like, I don't care what the men's department at Marshall's suddenly has decided that like men need to wear. I'm gonna go for what makes me feel more authentic.
So fashion trends, they define your gender. So the length of your shorts will define if you're a man or a woman. Clothing stores, they don't define your gender. That's on you. They sell clothes. They just want to make some money. It's all about the money.
The hardest thing.
Very true. Like super true. So like it's like whenever clothing brands are like whenever they do an inclusive campaign, when like they have, for example, like a plus size person or a disabled person on the cover, or even a trans person, like it's money grab. You know what I'm saying? Like a corporation is very disinterested in probably the well-being of people. I don't necessarily want to say that entirely, but maybe they're probably more interested in profit, like at a baseline, and then other things become more interesting. Maybe if it's like a nonprofit, maybe you have different opinions. But yeah, but another thing that we're saying is that like, I think that the fact that he's talking about like fashion designers and brands talks to the larger idea of kind of like how once again, in very conservative circles, they make fun of people like Harry Styles. And they're like, where have all the good men gone? All the men are gone. They're all so feminine. Oh no. Like we currently have people who will say things like, if you do this and you're less of a man. So let's establish that as a fact. And then we have society who's like, oh, let's also change what we think is manly and what's not manly. Very long ago, makeup and that stuff was really common for men to wear, but now that's seen as like, oh, you're a femme or whatever. One time I watched this video, and it was of this one woman who was like, she was being really mean at like she was like getting kicked out of a gym or something. And like there was this dude, he was working, he was like, you need to get out because you're being ridiculous. And he had his nails painted. And she was like, oh, you got your nails painted? Are you trans or something? What? Like, since when does like a person wearing nail polish mean they're trans? Like, we're doing. So I guess, like, for example, if a person is watching this video and they're like, wow, spiking your hair and not liking changes in fashion trends makes you non-binary. I would be like, okay, like I don't know if that's a good description of what it means to be non-binary. Maybe they might walk away with a little bit of like a shallow understanding of the non-binary experience if they just watch this one, I don't know, Jubilee type video on trans experience or cut or whatever this is from.
About coming out at 17 is no one believes you. Everyone is like, wow, that's a really cute phase you're having.
Even though I'm ashamed to even say it, I used to identify as genderqueer. I was 16, living in a basement, confused about everything, and I thought that it would make me feel better. But guess what? It didn't. For a lot of trans people,
Just real quick, like genderqueer was probably a step for you on your trans journey, and it probably wasn't satisfying to you because you're a binary trans man. Like, but if you were a genderqueer or like a gender, like a more non-binary-ish umbrella type of person, you probably would have been satisfied. But since you weren't satisfied, you were still not content, which makes a lot of sense. So I don't know how that helps anything. You might actually just be supporting the fact of the validity of this. Maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think?
they go through that phase, and that's completely fine. And when I criticize non-binary people, I don't criticize the people who are confused about their identity, or for the people who maybe think that they're non-binary, but it turns out they have gender dysphoria and they end up transitioning. I'm not criticizing them.
See, okay. So like there once again is another misconception about non-binary. I do think that, for example, like there maybe is a little bit of confusion. There are some non-binary people who says, I'm non-binary, I'm not trans, and I want to respect their identities. But there are non-binary people who are trans. And that's the part that upsets me, is you are completely erasing an entire group of people. Like, and the thing that makes me upset is there are non-binary people who are also like trans medicalists and who have probably very, very similar perspectives as you, as someone who's like you, who's very, let's say, like they're pretty restrictive in their definition of trans people, but they're very non-binary. I don't know why he's just digging himself into this hole. I don't get it.
I only criticize people who are activists or who are outspoken about it.
Most people are going to assume that you're one of two genders, a man or a woman, and so every single day you have to be correcting them.
That seems like a lot of work. Jeez.
A lot of time.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. It's frustrating. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to walk through the world like with, for example, like I'm sure that okay. My experience as a non-binary person with dysphoria, with like body-based dysphoria and like needing to change my outward appearance and stuff like that, that sucks. You know what I'm saying? But I'm able but because of this, I'm able to kind of move away from always being gendered as female, which is great for me. I love that for myself. But someone who is AMAB or AFAB, who maybe they only have social dysphoria, and so medical transition isn't a part of their journey, but maybe they use they them pronouns or are very, very much dislike being gendered as that opposite gender, but don't have gender dysphoria in their body to kind of make any medical changes. That must really stink and be really hard to live in this world that where nobody really kind of sees you for who you are. And I think most non-binary people are very aware that they're not going to be gendered in society, that they kind of are going to have to put in a lot of effort and energy. I typically don't put in the effort or energy to be gendered I just don't. I just deal with it and cry later. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's a lot of work to correct people all the time. So yes, it is a lot of work. And the fact that people are willing to put in this much effort might mean that there's a little bit of some, I don't know about value, but some validity to why people would work this hard.
Sometimes people get pronouns right twice, and then I find it's often the third time that people start slipping.
And how does that make you feel? This is where I get a little bit triggered and a little bit mad, because in my case, when people use the wrong pronouns, it makes me nauseous and it makes me extremely dysphoric. But non-binary people, they don't experience gender dysphoria, so
look at like all of this misinformation, it just disturbs me. Like that's a good word to use, because it's just, I wish that you had accurate information. If he had accurate information and was like, I know that dysphoric non-binary people exist in that transition, I disregard their identity. That would make me feel maybe a little bit better, because like it would be honest, but this isn't honest.
They don't have that biological, uncontrollable feeling of nausea and sadness.
Yes, I do. I know exactly. It feels really gross. It feels so bad to be misgendered, really bad. And it's hard. It's also hard to describe, but that's a really good way to describe it, that nauseous feeling. He's talking way, way out of his ass. He has no idea what he's talking about. And that makes me really upset. The thing is I'm not going to diminish his experience as a binary trans man. And I know that it's really difficult to be a binary trans man. And for example, someone like me could make a binary trans man dysphoric. I have long hair. I can be pretty feminine in my, I don't know, mannerisms and way of speaking. I could put on extra jewelry and things like that that can be perceived as feminine. I paint my nails sometimes. Like those things could make trans man very dysphoric. They would not even be able to touch those things. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I know that a lot of trans men find it very liberating when they feel secure enough in their masculinity that they're able to do things like dress femininely or put nail polish on or whatever. Because it's like, you know what, I'm a man, and so I can do whatever I want. I don't have to feel dysphoria because of these things. And like, sometimes getting out of this, it's a weird thing. Like, I know you're like, you can't think your way out of dysphoria, but like, sometimes you can like support yourself. Like, let me tell you a story. So I am like, you know, like I said, I'm pretty feminine, but sometimes my femininity gives me dysphoria. And the other day I was like by myself, there's nobody around, you know, I was just by myself listening to this one song, and it was super good. And I was like kind of dancing by myself to it. And I was like, these dances feel like kind of feminine. I felt like kind of grossed out by it, and like that icky dysphoria feeling, you know what I mean? I felt it, and I was like, and then I stopped and I was kind of bummed out for a little bit. And I was like, wait a second, like, no, like I'm having a good time. Like, I'm not going to let my dysphoria like stop me from enjoying myself in this moment. So I like put the music back on, and I just like danced through the discomfort and had a good time. Like, yeah, I was uncomfortable at some points, but like, it's not something that I'm willing to just be like, oh, well, I'm just never gonna do it again because it makes me feel dysphoric. Like that, I don't want to do that. I want to there are some times where I think it's appropriate to kind of say like, okay, dysphoria, I'm just gonna, you know, push against it. Sometimes, you know, it's hard to do those things. Like if you were to say, okay, just say no to your dysphoria and go outside without a binder, I would be like, no, I am not gonna do that. Like that would be too far out of my comfort zone. You know what I mean? But thank goodness I got a permanently flat chest. So I now don't have to worry about that anymore. And I could just go outside and not have to think about it and be free. Like, so I know what it's like to have dysphoria, right?
I feel like a lot of non-binary activists, they try to copy real trans people's social issues to seem more legit. It actually makes me sick.
You can't be.
Who? Oh my God. I guess that's weird. It's like, for example, instead of, so you'll hear people say things like, oh, trans people are just like, trans women are just appropriating womanhood, or they're just appropriating manhood or whatever. And it's kind of like that similar thing where you're saying, oh, but you're just appropriating transness. A non-binary person is just forcing themselves into the trans experience by making up the fact that they have gender dysphoria. Come on. It's funny because it's like, because this non-binary person is literally saying like dysphoria really stinks. It's really hard to have to, you know, correct people, and people sometimes they get the pronouns right and then they keep messing up. Marcus could probably really resonate with that. He can resonate with maybe someone getting their pronouns right a couple of times, but then kind of slipping and using the wrong pronouns. Like that's, you know, that's frustrating. I know what that's like. I can resonate with that. I'm sure you could too. But so that, and I try to see what even if when I disagree with someone, I try to find things that I do agree with, because it reminds me to keep the other person human and make sure that we're at the same level. Because, you know, I'm just as bad as the next person. You know, like, yeah, I probably have eaten something in the past week that was like made by like, you know, like the sweat or like, you know, child labor laws or something. Like I probably have supported an unethical practice somewhere, but maybe even by using technology, right? Like if I continue to demonize people and try to put myself above them, I'm not doing any favors for myself.
Seen as heterosexual, you can't be seen as homosexual.
And why is that? Can a non-binary person be gay? Can a non-binary person be straight? Not really, technically. Being gay means that you are attracted to the same gender, but if you don't have a gender, if you don't identify with either one of them, then you can't be gay. But can you be straight though? Because when you're straight, you're attracted to the opposite gender. But what is the opposite gender of non-binary? You know, they make it so complicated.
I think the future.
I don't really have a lot to say. I commented on that thing before with like trixic and toric. Like there are other words for non-binary's experience of sexuality. Just because you were too lazy to do a quick Google search, or even to communicate with other transmedicalist non-binary people and understand their perspective, that I'm sorry, you just are uneducated.
Of gender identity, hopefully, is one where we don't force the binary on everybody.
But it's
Yeah, like I think that's a good idea.
okay to force the non-binary ideology on everyone.
I hate the force thing. Like nobody forced you to click on that video and watch the video of these non-binary people talking about their lives. People click it voluntarily, you know what I'm saying? And the only other type of thing is like if a real non-binary person is like, "Hey, could you use my correct pronouns? Thank you." And then you're like, "Oh no, I'm being oppressed because my free speech is being impinged upon because I refuse to call you he, hit, or they, them pronouns." Come on. Like it's super annoying. Sometimes I feel like they're like maybe like certain neo-pronouns that like I'm like, okay, maybe I understand why you'd be like unwilling to try these things, but like I like a basic they, them. I feel like that's pretty reasonable. Like pretty reasonable. And the thing is like I also don't want to be the kind of person to be like, oh, let me try and like see what transgender people are valid and which ones aren't. Because at the end of the day, anti-trans people just hate trans people, period. And they don't want any of us to have good lives. So yeah.
My point is that it's unrealistic to have an expectation that the majority will adapt to the minority.
I disagree, actually. Sometimes that's actually necessary. Slavery. Slaves were, I don't know, I think probably were the minority in terms of population. The entire public deserved to change for the minority in that situation. Definitely. Jim Crow laws, minority, definitely. The world should definitely change for that minority. Disabled individuals, the world should definitely change for disabled people. Oh no, I have to change my business and make it wheelchair accessible. How dare those selfish disabled people force this awful change on the society? Nobody wants to see that. You know what? Do you guys remember Miss Candace Owens? She's this like pretty popular Black conservative woman who I don't have a lot of respect for, who literally the other day complained about a wheelchair model modeling underwear, saying things like, we don't want to see things like that. I forget exactly the words that she used, and I don't want to like put words in her mouth, but it was disturbing. Like the kind of language, it's so old. Like it was kind of like the old language where like, disabled people, please stay out of sight, out of mind. Nobody wants to see all that stuff. It's like what? Yes, sometimes the world does have to change. Sometimes we do have to put in a lot of effort to make sure that the greater population knows about something that a smaller population is dealing with. Do I think that we should force things down people's throats? I don't think that is ever happening. I don't think that for example, when people with disabilities say like, hey, we would like to be able to get into places and have some basic rights and maybe have employment and things like that. Oh, you're just giving handouts to those. Like, it's ridiculous. The language that you're using it falls apart after a while. And I I don't know if you guys heard that, but that was God, that was my dog. My wife just got home and that scared the shit out of me. Okay. But yeah, that's it.
It's most likely that the minority adapts to the majority, if that makes sense.
I hope that the future will move towards more of individual expression rather than this mob mentality to follow the crowd to be like everybody else.
So it's a mob mentality to be a man and a woman. You're not an individual if you're not trans. This is where this movement has a tendency to demonize cisgender people. In the future,
Wait, okay. So do you want, let me just share with you what just some mirrors of this. A lot of similar conversation is had around sexual orientation. That gay people feel pressure to be straight. And maybe that person never had anyone say, you must be straight. Like, no one ever pointed to them and forced them to be straight. But society there's this unspoken pressure to kind of conform to the normal thing. Because when people don't conform, people like you make them feel like shit. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, actually. Yeah, so when this happens for people, we're like, yeah, we just want people to know that there are other options, that, just being straight, that's just unrealistic. There are lots of other people. So we might as well just tell people that there are multiple types of sexuality so that people stop feeling so awful and isolated and like they're alone in the world. That's pretty much the point of educating people and educating youth about gender identity and sexual orientation so that they don't feel so awful and they don't understand what's going on with themselves. I think that's one of the worst things, is to grow up so confused about who you are. To know that you have options is very liberating.
being normal is the new unique thing.
I definitely wish that we can all.
I think there's also, just really quick, I wanted to very much and I'll agree. I'll agree. I'll bite on that one. Like, there is a little bit of I see it with, for example, some of the fake disorder cringe stuff that you see. There was this doctor who made a video talking about how there may be some presentations of what dissociative identity disorder actually looks like, how it's a little bit different from how people on TikTok are kind of describing it. And then people got mad at the doctor for saying what he said. I'm like, come on, guys, let the medical professionals do what they do. I understand that there are barriers with diagnosis and there are issues with certain things, but that also doesn't mean that we just get to say that all doctors are stupid. It's just,
in the future, being normal is the new unique thing.
I definitely wish that we can all just pass through this phase of trying to categorize people.
Should I say it? Okay. If you identify as non-binary, you are categorized.
and I'll agree with that too. Yeah, it's like you're choosing to not categorize. I guess what that other non-binary person was probably saying was it's that same kind of, that felt sense of the pressure of the choice. You are either this or that. You are in these binary categorizations. I mean, if I'm going to be expansive, and I'll say maybe that's probably what they were referring to. But yeah, I also do agree that non-binary is definitely a category. Non-binary is definitely a category. We can't deny that. I'm also really open to see what your thoughts are on all of this stuff. Transphobic, trans people. I don't. I don't even. I thought that was funny. Oh yeah. If anyone has any questions or thoughts, that I'm down for that right now. I'm glad. I feel really glad that I'm able to talk about this stuff now. Because just like there's someone else, I think Eric, or I forget who it was, Edic, yeah, Blue, like also shared like I can't watch this stuff by myself, and like yeah, neither can I. Like it's really tough to get through this content, and me watching it here with you makes me feel a little bit bolder, gives me a little bit more ability to be directly sassy about my responses. And yeah, I'm not like, my point here isn't just to be mean. My point is really to kind of like help other people who are like me, help other people who are really sensitive people, um, who other sensitive non-binary people who are sensitive to people like Marcus, kind of just spout all of this deceit and lies. And it's awful just to, it sucks to go into the comments and like read a bunch of people agree and things like that. And it's super discouraging. And in the trans community, we don't need this, guys. We don't need this kind of infighting. What we do need is to figure out how to support each other very well, and yeah, fight against general transphobia. Because I think what we have to understand is that like at the end of the day, the people who are like on the fence about, like, not necessarily on the fence, but the people who are kind of like really against a lot of the trans people, but are like, oh, but you Blair White type of trans person, I think you're okay. I think you're good. Those are the same people who will probably like take away your rights, you know, if it comes down to that. We see it happening all the time. When they get an inch, they take a mile. When they get rid of gender affirming care for kids, they try to raise it up to age 26. And after they raise it up to age 26, who knows like what else this is gonna do? Like there are talks about like, yeah, making it more difficult for people to access testosterone. Like that'll directly affect me in my life, in my gender transition, because of the way that I get my medical care. This stuff it impacts my life directly. And I think that like these conversations, these trans people being so vehemently against trans healthcare and like just not letting doctors make decisions, like, yeah, for sure. There are going to be situations, excuse me, there are going to be situations where like a young child makes a decision about their gender and then they're wrong and they detransition. And that's really sad and that really stinks. And I think like, especially for minors, we need to have, I would say like, it is okay to gatekeep minors, like, and make sure that we do a lot of extensive, you know, support and therapy and community support, and make sure there are a lot of things in place for transgender youth, which I think would make it really difficult. And like, yeah, I'm saying this, and then at the same time, like, I don't know, like, does that mean that there are going to be other trans youth who are then going to pursue like unhealthy methods of accessing, you know, hormone therapy? I don't know. I just, I want there to be lots of trans people who make it, you know, lots of trans people who make it. And yeah, we have to get care to do that, I would say. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. I think that's most of all of my thoughts about that. Any of you guys have any other thoughts about being non-binary? Anyone else have any thoughts about like being a trans? No. Does anyone have any other thoughts about transphobic trans people, which is kind of the whole idea of this video. Even though we only talked about one guy, there are lots of other people who are doing this thing. Yeah, guys, it's tough out there, for sure. And if you guys want to have more conversations and like chat with me directly, please reach out on Instagram. That's where I feel like I do a lot of my like chatting and like updates on like my life generally. I like have my Guys, I spilled water on my laptop. So like it wasn't even that much water, but apparently it was enough for my laptop to like the keyboard to be all screwed up. So I'm using my wife's like laptop tablet thing, and I'm upset because I need that for work. And so hopefully that gets working. And so I mentioned that just because it made things a little bit complicated this week. And so hopefully I'll be able to just get back to normal and everything will be okay. But that's pretty much the only thing. Yeah, if no one else has any other thoughts. Wow, I just keep yawning. Man. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, I think last week people had some other thoughts about like, or some people had questions about like not like transgender celebrities and things like that. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversations about people like Jeffrey Marsh and Dylan Mulvaney and Elliot Page. Elliot's a little bit like way out of the spotlight these days. It's more of maybe I would say, even like on YouTube, there's a lot of like Jeffrey Marsh hate. But yeah, if there's no other thoughts, I think I'm just gonna wrap it up here. I appreciate you all like joining in and having these conversations with me, and I'm open to like different types of requests for content. I guess I'm tired because I keep yawning. I've yawned like 6 times in this live stream. But yeah, I'm gonna have a chill rest of the day. I hope that you guys have a chill day as well. Like I said, I want to be back later in the week to talk about that other video, the detransitioners video, because I have thoughts about that too. So we'll talk about that later in the week. Yeah, peace out, my friends. Yeah, I'll just wrap this up. Okay, peace and love. I'll see you next time.